Sense and Sensibility is a novel written by Jane Austen. It was published in the year 1811. First, I'll introduce you to the character. Eleanor Dashwood, she is the eldest daughter of Mrs. Dashwood. She is a girl characterized by her sense. Marraine Dashwood, she is the youngest daughter of Mrs. Dashwood. She is known for her sensibility, emotional openness and impulsiveness. Mrs. Dashwood, so she is the mother of Eleanor, Marraine and Margaret. Margaret Dashwood, she is the youngest daughter of Mrs. Dashwood. Edward Ferrars, a kind and honorable gentleman with a reserved nature who forms an attachment to Eleanor. Colonel Brandon, he is a dignified older bachelor who falls in love with Marraine. John Willoughby, a charming and dashing suitor of Marraine, whose intentions and characters are questionable. John Dashwood, half-brother to Eleanor, Marraine and Margaret, who is selfish and easily influenced by his wife. Fanny Dashwood, John's greedy and manipulative wife, who schemes to deprive her sisters-in-law of their inheritance. Sir John Middleton, a jovial and generous cousin of Mrs. Dashwood, who offers the Dashwoods a cottage on his estate. Lady Middleton, Sir John's wife, who is polite but superficial. Mrs. Jennings, Lady Middleton's mother, a wealthy social and matchmaking widow. Lucy Steele, a cunning and ambitious young woman who becomes engaged to Edward Ferrars secretly. Robert Ferrars, Edward's vain and selfish younger brother. Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen tells the story of the Dashwood sisters, Eleanor and Marraine, who face love, heartbreak and societal changes in 19th century England. The Dashwood family lives at Norland Park. When Mr. Dashwood dies, the estate goes to his son from his first marriage, John Dashwood. Mr. Dashwood's second wife, Mrs. Dashwood, and their three daughters, Eleanor, Marraine and Margaret, are left with very little money. John and his greedy wife, Fanny, do not help the Dashwood women as promised. Mrs. Dashwood and her daughters move to a small cottage called Barton Cottage, offered by a kind relative, Sir John Middleton. The Middletons are friendly and introduce the Dashwoods to their social circle, including Colonel Brandon, a quiet and kind man who falls in love with Marraine. Eleanor, the eldest Dashwood sister, is calm and sensible. She forms a close bond with Edward Ferrars, Fanny's brother. However, Edward's mother wants him to marry a rich woman and Edward is hesitant to express his feelings for Eleanor. Later, Eleanor learns that Edward has been secretly engaged to a woman named Lucy Steele for years, which breaks her heart. Marraine, the middle sister, is emotional and spontaneous. She falls in love with John Willoughby, a charming young man. They spend a lot of time together and everyone expects them to get married. However, Willoughby suddenly leaves for London without proposing. Marraine is devastated. The Dashwood sisters visit London with Mrs. Jennings, Sir John's mother-in-law. Marraine hopes to see Willoughby, but he avoids her. She finds out that he is engaged to a wealthy woman, Miss Grey. Marraine is heartbroken and becomes very ill. Colonel Brandon reveals his past to Eleanor. He was in love with a woman named Eliza who was forced to marry his brother. Eliza was unhappy and after they divorced, she fell into poverty. She had a daughter also named Eliza who was seduced and abandoned by Willoughby. Colonel Brandon cares for Eliza's daughter now. Edward's secret engagement to Lucy becomes known and his mother disowns him. Lucy then switches her affection to Edward's brother Robert. Freed from his engagement, Edward proposes to Eleanor and she happily accepts. Marraine learns from her heartbreak and realizes she needs to balance her emotions with sense. She begins to appreciate Colonel Brandon's steady and sincere love. Eventually, she marries Colonel Brandon. The novel ends with both sisters finding happiness. Eleanor marries Edward and Marraine marries Colonel Brandon. They both learn valuable lessons about love, society, and the balance between sense and sensibility.